My name's Kathryn Prescott. I'm the writer-director of Jane, the short film playing at Austin Film Festival. Well, I had wanted to write a story, well, firstly, so addiction has affected my family somewhat throughout my life and some of my closest friends. And I had always wanted to write a story about someone suffering from addiction where that wasn't the whole main point of the story. That was kind of just the backdrop. And I moved 2 years ago, I moved to downtown LA next to a single room occupancy hotel. And so those two things combined, I just thought it would be an interesting backdrop, and one, the SRO Hotel that I haven't seen something set in one before. Also, like, as I kind of grew up, I became aware of this stigma around people with addiction and suffering from it, and you know, they're often seen as like they're making a choice and that like immoral, selfish, whatever. And I just didn't see it like that. And yeah, just something that showed the humanity and selflessness that still exists in someone suffering from addiction, even despite choices that we might not understand or might from the outside seem selfish. It's coming from a place of pain. Well, I think having acted, I don't know, I can't speak. Gail will tell you, I don't know, but I think it does help me as a director, because I've been in the shoes of someone. Like, being an actor is you're really vulnerable when you're on set and you're, you know, surrounded by like 50 to 100 people or more, I don't know, and you're trying to be your most like vulnerable self in this like created world that isn't real. And I think, I don't know, I have always really valued the time, whatever time I spent acting, whenever I'm directing, because I feel like it helps me give notes. It helps me understand the kind of, you know, mental place of someone who's doing that, especially when it comes to the more emotional scenes. Helps me with writing, I think, because when I'm writing, I'm naturally like trying to say the lines out loud as an actor, and if I'm like, oh, this is like not working, it's something to do with how I'm writing it, not to do with the actor. So yeah, very helpful, I think. I guess, I hope, I don't know if we ended up doing it, I hope we touched on it a little bit, but my original aim was to hint at least at, like I said, the choices that other people make that we might not understand or might look a certain way to us from the outside. You can't judge someone's life whose experiences you've not even close to lived yourself. You know, Jane's living in an incredibly difficult situation, and I don't think anyone chooses to live like that if they have the choice. And she's kind of in survival mode, and I think a lot of the way she lives and the choices she continues to make are a result of pain and shame. She then makes choices which lead to more, because of the way people see addiction, because of the way people look at her, more pain and shame, and it's just cyclical. So we really wanted to film, so the cinematographer is called Nate Hertzellers. He's great. He does a lot of narrative work, but he did a lot of documentary work before that, which gives him a really I think what he did which was so great, and we had talked about before, was the story and the environment that it's set in. We wanted the cinematography to reflect that. So, you know, the environment was like raw, real, stark, unpretentious. You know, we wanted it to just be authentic to that environment, not like make it look really bad and not make it look really slick, but just make it really real. I don't love close-ups. Like, I think when you can see someone's in their environment, that tells you a lot, like body language and stuff. You can infer a lot. You know, you don't need to see like right here to know that someone's feeling sad when you can see everything else that's going on. in my opinion. So we were really sparse with close-ups, and I also think that when you use them sparingly, when you do see a close-up, it has more weight to it. There was a scene when she's listening to the voicemail, and we had that originally all in like sort of a medium shot, and we were playing with it, and eventually it just felt, she did like a lean like this when she'd heard the news in the wide, and it felt so much more powerful, that small movement, even though you couldn't see her face, than a close-up. So I just think, yeah, constantly wanted to reflect her environment, didn't want to be force-feeding emotion to people with extreme close-ups, and just keeping it authentic. So there were a few, I mean, I love Andrea Arnold. She's one of my favorite directors. Fish Tank was like, one of the reasons that I, wanted to act or write or anything. Monster was a huge reference for this film with Charlize Theron. I thought Patty Jenkins did, and The Wrestler. All three of them, Fish Tank, The Wrestler, and Monster, are films where you're seeing characters who, if you just met them and interacted with them, and I don't know if you'd have do you know what I mean? They make choices sometimes that it can be very easy to be like, oh, well, you're doing this, and so you're doing this to yourself. And then when you actually take the time to get to know them even a little bit, you can see actually they have had to overcome so much and are struggling, and that behavior is coming from, and you get to see all the goodness and the flip side strengths of what's going on and some of their behavior. Yeah, Andrea Arnold, I'm trying to think other directors. I always go blank when people ask me this, but mainly it was films, specific films that we were taking reference from. Well, again, so like, I'm not a documentary filmmaker. I felt like it was a really interesting environment to have as a backdrop, and I know from living next to a single room occupancy hotel how important and like vital to so many people their existence is. I hope that just the fact that we're showing a woman living in this situation highlights the fact that people live in SRO hotels, and it's not always like Jane. They are by no means all struggling with addiction or anything like that. But I do think especially when the middle class is like disappearing, it can become easy to forget that, especially in the film industry, we're like very privileged, and I don't know, there are a lot of people living not like this, and their stories are just as important, if not more important. Yeah, that's what we really wanted, was to not be like, oh, look at this person who's suffering from addiction and this is the only thing that's going on in her life, because that just didn't ring true to anyone I know who suffered from addiction. Oftentimes the other struggles that they have going on in their life are the reason that they're not in a position yet to overcome their addiction, because other stuff is, when you're insecurely housed, I can imagine that's, and if you're addicted to heroin and you don't use for a few hours, and you start getting sick, and it becomes very difficult to do anything, let alone like get your life together, and so yeah, we really just wanted that to be like, this is just her backdrop, her life, and the story is something besides that. I would say to young directors, take acting classes, because I just think that helps everyone, and writers actually, but in terms of getting stuff made, I would say just really focus on like telling, like why you want to tell stories. I think a lot of people, or when I was, before I was directing, I remember people would be like, you got to do it now, and you got to like hurry up, and it's just about content and like making stuff. And I don't necessarily agree. I think think about it, go live life a bit, think about like what stories you want to tell, what questions you want to ask, what disturbs you or what lifts you up, and why you want to tell stories, and focus on that, focus on the script. And then once you have that, I think people naturally gravitate towards scripts that make them feel that you actually have something to say, or a real like difficult question to ask or something, and people will want to be a part of your project if it's coming from that kind of place, in my opinion.